So starting with encryption. Encryption is the process that encodes messages or files so that it can only be read by those who knows which cipher or key should be used to decode it. Encryption has been around for a long time. We've had the Scythian cipher, used by the ancient Spartans around 600 BC, and the Caesar cipher, invented by Julius Caesar around 60 BC. There are a lot of different types of encryption, such as transposition and substitution. In transposition, the letters in a message are rearranged, creating an anagram of the original message where only the sender and receiver knows the system of rearrangement. Some well-known transpositions are the Ralph-Fan cipher, either vertical or zigzag, and the transposition with keys. In substitution, the letters from the original message are changed for new letters from some cipher alphabet. Some well-known substitutions are monoalphabetic cipher, Kamasutra cipher, Caesar cipher, polyalphabetic cipher, and the Veneer cipher. Modern cryptography uses algorithms. These algorithms are mathematical functions for encrypting and decrypting messages. There are two main types of key encryptions: a summary key encryption, also known as a public key or secret key, and an asymmetric key encryption, also known as the public key. The summary key algorithm, sometimes also called the secret key algorithm, is an algorithm which uses the same key to encrypt and decrypt data. Because of this, it is considered to be generally faster than the use of a public key encryption. So how does it work? Let's say we have Bob and Alice. Bob and Alice agree on a key. Bob encrypts the message using the key and sends Alice the encrypted message. Alice decrypts the message using the key. Well, there are some problems with this method, one being that the same key is being used to encrypt and decrypt data, which means that the key needs to be securely stored to prevent attackers to gain access to the key. A second problem is that for the second person to decrypt the data, the key needs to be transferred through a secure channel. So if an attacker listens in at the start where Bob and Alice decide on a key, the attacker could then decrypt all the messages that Bob and Alice send to each other. For the public key encryption, two keys are used: the public key and the private key. The public key is used to encrypt data, and the private key is used to decrypt data. An example of how it would work with a public key is that Bob and Alice agree on a public key. Alice sends Bob her public key. Bob then encrypts his message using Alice's public key and sends the encrypted message back. Alice decrypts the message using the private key. This solves the first problem we have with a summary key, that even if the attacker knew the public key, they could not decrypt the message. So what is the main problem with a public key? It is very slow compared to the symmetric algorithm. There are multiple different algorithms and processes to solve problems that occurs either using a symmetric key or public key. One process to partly solve the problem with the symmetric key is the Diffie-Hellman key exchange, which is a smart algorithm to confuse an attacker. Another process to help solve the problem with the public key is by using a hybrid key, which uses both a symmetric key and public key.
One methodology used in cryptographic anti-forensics is steganography. Steganography is the practice of hiding secret messages or information within otherwise non-secret data. A simple non-computational example would be a letter. So the decoy message about a holiday, for example, would be written in black visible ink, and there would be a secret message written between the lines in invisible ink. So when the correct person gets the letter, they would know to look for the hidden message, and hopefully anyone else would be fooled by what seems like just a normal letter. In a more technical-oriented way, steganography is defined as the art or practice of concealing a message, image, or file within another message, image, or file. So you might be thinking, why would you want to use steganography to hide secret information when there's a chance that a non-authorized person could just accidentally stumble onto the info? This is plain encryption versus steganography. While the goal of encryption is simply to hide the data in a way that prevents others from being able to read the message, the goal of steganography is to hide the fact that a message has even been sent. Of course, the two are frequently combined for extra layers of security, for example, a password set to even access the file. Two files are used in making a steganographic file. First, the carrier file. The carrier file is the cover file that will be used as an envelope for the payload. This could be an unassuming picture, audio file, video file, etc. Then there's the payload. The payload is the actual secret message. Now, there are a couple of caveats to this. The carrier file must contain enough redundant data to be replaced by the secret message. This means that the secret message should typically be a max of 20% of the carrier file, depending on a few factors. A method of steganography is image steganography. This is using an image as a carrier file with a payload embedded within it. We're going to explore the most basic method, which is called least significant bit steganography. To understand this, we first need to understand what an image is made of. For this example, we will use a black and white photo. Grayscale photos like this utilize only one channel to color each pixel. This channel contains an 8-bit number which represents the amount of the intensity of light in it. So we'd have 0 intensity, which is black, and we'd have up to 255 intensity, which is white. Hence, we can have black, white, and 254 shades of gray. To hide a payload in this kind of image, we can change the least significant bit to the values of our data, for example, changing a 0 to a 1 or a 1 to a 0. When we do this, the intensity of the light for that pixel will change, but not enough to be even noticeable to the human eye, as it's only going up by 1 or down by 1 typically. For example, these are two different shades of grey of intensities 128 and 127. Can you even tell the difference? So for this type of steganography to work, we need to use a bitmap file such as PNG, where there isn't any external compression. Since we're trying to hide a file at the bit level, external compression may ruin the message. Now, I have an example of a photo I took of an empty box of Jaffa cakes in black and white. The message we want to send is this paint image of a black box with the message "Hello World" inside. Using a freely available online tool, we can edit the bitmap and change the least significant bit to encode our message and produce an encoded file, which is this one. As you can see, there is barely any difference between the original file and the encoded file, at least visually. This is because we've only changed the least significant bit, and that change is practically imperceptible to us. If we do put them next to each other, however, we can see a few shifts in color, but otherwise it is still hard to see a major difference, and that's because there isn't one visually really, just a slight shift in color. Now here are some examples of how changing the number of pixels changed also changes the image. As you can see, the more bits that are changed, the more the picture sort of merges. As our payload is quite small compared to the carrier file, 9 kilobytes versus about 250 kilobytes, we only really start seeing major differences at 3+ bits changed. This image is known as a steganographic file to the encoded file. In this picture, the darker a pixel is, the more it's been changed. The colors have been enhanced by using a tool on the website cited to highlight differences, as normally they wouldn't be this visible. The carrier file was 500 by 500 pixels, and the payload was also 500 by 500 pixels. I have a small case study here about how steganography can also be used in forensics as well as anti-forensics. One such case is steganographic watermarking. When Hollywood movie screeners are sent to critics, there used to be rampant illegal file sharing and copyright abuses. To combat this, the MPAA, Motion Picture Association of America, started steganographically watermarking their screeners with unique IDs, identifying each individual copy in a process known as dotting. This is not quite as simple as least significant bit steganography. It involves more complex methods by comparing the ratio of data in the whole file. One such movie was the 2006 animated hit Flushed Away. A copy of this screener was sent to an Academy member, and within a few weeks, a copy was found on torrent sites. Paramount Pictures the distributor of the film, was able to download a copy and decode their own payload, and the ID was found to belong to a Mrs. Nunez Jr. As it turns out, when investigated, her brother Salvador Nunez Jr. was confronted by the FBI and he confessed to the crime after forensic analysis of his laptop.
Breaking passwords. Nowadays, everything from your personal computer to your phone to the data of large corporations is password protected. This is why it's the most common way to attempt to bypass modern day digital security. Passwords are often stored on encrypted files or databases inside the computer systems in their hashed form. Hashing is a form of encryption in itself, and it involves running the password through an algorithm which changes it into a seemingly random string of characters, letters, and numbers. This allows the the password to be still encrypted in the case of a data breach. And the way data credential entry is done is that the entered password is hashed, and then the hashed sum is compared to the hash sum inside the database. Now, the first method of password attacking we'll look at is brute force. The brute force method of password cracking involves the strategy of essentially trying out every possible combination in order to crack the password. This includes every letter, uppercase and lowercase, numbers, and special characters. Nowadays, its main focus is to crack small passwords and PIN codes. In the cases where the attackers cannot bypass the encryption the password uses. The reason for this is that brute force attacks take a significantly large amount of time to crack a modern day 8 to 10 a digit password. For example, as I mentioned, the 8 to 10 modern day password that every website requires uh, a combination of letters, uppercase and lowercase, symbols, and numbers. It would take anywhere from multiple years to multiple millennia on a modern 8-core processor to brute force attack, unless you have a supercomputer, in which case it takes a lot less. An interesting find is this website, which essentially allows you to see how secure your password is. Of course, you should take this with a grain of salt. These things aren't always accurate, and you should never fully give out your password. Just think about something similar to it if you want to try this for yourself. Social engineering is not necessarily an attack on the password, but more an attack on the user itself. This often takes the form of phishing emails and impersonating IT technicians from companies that need you to confirm your password and the entirety of your login credentials, usually as a facade for there has been a security breach and we need you to confirm your data, which is ironic. This attack method, however, is also used to gather information that could be relevant to cracking a password with a method that we'll discuss shortly. This information could be anything from personal info like date of birth, name, sometimes full name, nicknames, list of places, spousal names, anything that could relate to a password. And this plays into dictionary attacks. Dictionary attacks are essentially are very similar to brute force attack, but are more or less an educated guess. These passwords rely on a large dictionary of commonly used words or phrases in passwords. These dictionaries are readily available online and pretty much anyone can get their hands on them. But the social engineering aspect of this allows for narrowing down the potential list of password worthy words that could be used in it. However, this attack is not a guaranteed success like brute force because it doesn't exhaust every possibility there is. Password decryption is a more advanced method of password breaking since it relies on exploiting weaknesses of the encryption algorithm itself. An example technique is called plaintext method, which relies on acquiring parts of the encrypted files or databases holding the passwords in plain text and some in encrypted format. This allows the attacker to essentially reverse engineer the encryption and allow and have the ability to crack any other file that uses the same encryption. And these are the sources that I have used.
A more drastic step than just hiding data is data destruction. This refers to the process of destroying physical, electronic, and digital data. Following data destruction, the original document should be completely unreadable or unable to be accessed. This can be done by individuals wanting to protect personal information, businesses to protect financial information, or in the case of a criminal investigation, by suspects to remove information that may be incriminating. The most well-known method is physical destruction. This can be completed by drilling, hammering, shredding, or degaussing. This is where high-powered magnets are used to turn the drive into scrap, rendering it inoperable. An alternative method of data destruction is drive wiping. This is a commercially available technique that can be completed by purchasing a computer code that overwrites the data with zeros multiple times until the data is rendered unreadable and unrecoverable. This method can be used to destroy both whole drives or individual files. There are many factors that need to be considered when investigating which of these methods is preferable. The first is data security. With physical destruction, it must be ensured that the drive is fully destroyed. This is because most methods leave large pieces of the drive intact, which means data can be recovered from it using forensic methods. There is also no way to audit the physical destruction of the drive. Drive wiping, however, requires fewer data handlers, as it often only requires one person. This means it has a more secure chain of custody, and therefore the data is more secure. The next issue is cost efficiency. External data destruction services for both methods can be expensive. Physical destruction renders hard drives unusable, and therefore new drives must be purchased. It can, however, easily be completed at home with no extra cost. Drive wiping is often more cost-effective, as drives can be reused or sold on once they've been wiped. The environmental impact is also an issue to be discussed regarding data destruction. Hardware contains toxic metals that can leach into the ground upon destruction, leaving a lasting impact. Drive wiping, however, means drives can be reused or recycled, and this leaching can be avoided. The type of drive also affects which method of data destruction is preferable. This is because solid-state drives are harder to wipe than hard drive disks. This is because they store data randomly rather than uniformly, meaning it's impossible to know where on the drive the data has been overwritten. Solid-state drives also do not support certain interfaces or commands, meaning sometimes not all the data can be removed. In these cases, physical destruction is required. In conclusion, we can see there are pros and cons to both methods of data destruction. Deciding on which method to use is often a personal choice and depends on what data needs to be destroyed on what drive.
Defragmentation, more commonly known as defragging, is an anti-forensic technique. It is a process that involves moving clusters of data as close together as possible into a single location on the drive, and is typically done to improve the performance of a computer. When a hard drive is really full, it is difficult for the computer to store large files, therefore making it hard to store a file in one contiguous space on the drive. As a result, parts of the file will be stored in a number of different locations within the drive and are therefore fragmented. Fragmentation slows down the performance of a computer as the hard drive has to search a number of locations in order to assemble a file before it can be loaded. To do this, the computer rewrites the data and erases the files that are located all over the disk. This image shows the effectiveness of defragmentation. The drive map at the top features lots of fragmented files, shown in red, scattered in between defragmented files, shown in blue, and other data. The drive map featured below is the data after defragmentation. The files are a lot more closer together. There are three ways in which defragmentation can occur. It can be scheduled by the user to periodically defragment. The user can also manually initiate defragmentation, or it can be done automatically by the operating system. Defragmentation can prove problematic in a forensic investigation. This is because during the process of defragmentation, some of the data can be overwritten. This data may have contained remnants of evidence. When coupled with file deletion, it decreases the likelihood of a deleted file from being recovered. Defragmentation is more effective in destroying evidence when the disk is nearly full or when defragmentation is performed a considerable amount of time before it is forensically analysed. However, Defragmentation will still leave a lot of trace evidence across the hard drive, proving that files have been removed. To determine whether a drive has been recently defragged, in Windows, boot the drive image and analyze the amount of file fragmentation. Typically, drives that are in regular use show a significant amount of file fragmentation. Therefore, drives that show low fragmentation without plausible explanation would be suspect. Sometimes it is difficult to prove the user's intent, as defragmentation is typically used to improve performance. However, the use of a defragmentation utility once and only after the suspect was made aware of the investigation is suspicious, suggesting that the suspect intended to wipe the data in order to destroy evidence. This information is useful in considering prosecution of the suspect.